Section 2 of The Cold Heart by Wilhelm Hauff. Translated by John Oxenford. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 2.
Face, then said the poor belabored Peter as he got up slowly, will rhyme with place. Now, glass mannikin, I will have another word with you. He went into the hut, took his hat and long stick, bid farewell to the inmates, and commenced his way back to the Tannenbühl. Being under the necessity of inventing a verse, he proceeded slowly and thoughtfully on his way. At length, when he was already within the precincts of the Tannenbühl, and the trees became higher and closer, he found his verse, and for joy cut a caper in the air. All at once he saw coming from behind the trees a gigantic man dressed like a raftsman, who held in his hand a pole as large as the mast of a ship. Peter Munk's knees almost gave way under him when he saw him slowly striding by his side, thinking he was no other than the Dutchman Michel. Still, the terrible figure kept silence, and Peter cast a side glance at him from time to time. He was full a head taller than the biggest man Peter had ever seen. His face expressed neither youth nor old age, but was full of furrows and wrinkles. He wore a jacket of linen, and the enormous boots being drawn above his leather breeches were well known to Peter from hearsay. "What are you doing in the Tannenbühl, Peter Munk?" asked the Wood King at length in a deep roaring voice. "Good morning, countrymen," replied Peter, wishing to show himself undaunted, but trembling violently all the while. "Peter Munk," replied Michel, casting a piercing, terrible glance at him, "your way does not lie through this grove." "True, it does not exactly," said Peter, "but being a hot day I thought it would be cooler here." "Do not lie, Peter," cried Michel in a thundering voice, "or I strike you to the ground with this pole. Think you I have not seen you begging of the little one?" he added mildly. "Come, come, confess it was a silly trick, and it is well you did not know the verse, for the little fellow is a skinflint, giving but little, and he to whom he gives is never again cheerful in his life. Peter, you are but a poor fool, and I pity you in my soul. You, such a brisk, handsome fellow, surely could do something better in the world than make charcoal. While others lavish big thalers and ducats, you can scarcely spend a few pence. 'Tis a wretched life." "You are right. It is truly a wretched life." "Well," continued Michel, "I will not stand upon trifles. You would not be the first honest good fellow whom I have assisted at a pinch. Tell me, how many 100 thalers do you want for the present?" shaking the money in his huge pocket as he said this, so that it jingled just as Peter had heard it in his dream. But Peter's heart felt a kind of painful convulsion at these words, and he was cold and hot alternately. For Michel did not look as if he would give away money out of charity without asking anything in return. The old man's mysterious words about rich people occurred to him, and urged by an inexplicable anxiety and fear, he cried, "Much obliged to you, sir, but I will have nothing to do with you, and know you well," and at the same time he began to run as fast as he could. The wood spirit, however, strode by his side with immense steps, murmuring and threatening. "You will yet repent it, Peter. It is written on your forehead, and to be read in your eyes that you will not escape me. Do not run so fast. Listen only to a single rational word. There is my boundary already." But Peter, hearing this and seeing at a little distance before him a small ditch, hastened the more to pass this boundary, so that Michel was obliged at length to run faster, cursing and threatening while pursuing him. With a desperate leap, Peter cleared the ditch, for he saw that the wood spirit was raising his pole to dash it upon him. Having fortunately reached the other side, he heard the pole shatter to pieces in the air as if against an invisible wall, and a long piece fell down at his feet. He picked it up in triumph to throw it at the rude Michel, but in an instant he felt the piece of wood move in his hand, and, to his horror, perceived that he held an enormous serpent, which was raising itself up towards his face, with its venomous tongue and glistening eyes. He let go his hold, but it had already twisted itself tight round his arm, and came still closer to his face with its vibrating head. At this instant, however, an immense black cock rushed down, seized the head of the serpent with its beak, and carried it up in the air. Michel, who had observed all this from the other side of the ditch, howled, cried, and raved when he saw the serpent carried away by one more powerful than himself. Exhausted and trembling, Peter continued his way. The path became steeper, the country wider, and soon he found himself before the large pine. He again made a bow to the invisible glass manikin, as he had done the day before, and said, "Keeper of wealth in the forest of pine, hundreds of years are surely thine. Thine is the tall pine's dwelling place, those born on Sunday. See thy face." "You have not quite hit it," said a delicate fine voice near him, "but as it is you, Peter, I will not be particular." Astonished, he looked round, and lo, under a beautiful pine there sat a little old man in a black jacket, red stockings, and a large hat on his head. He had a tiny affable face and a little beard as fine as a spider's web, and, strange to see, he was smoking a pipe of blue glass. Nay, Peter observed to his astonishment on coming nearer that the clothes, shoes, and hat of the little man were all of coloured glass, which was as flexible as if it were still hot, bending like cloth to every motion of the little man. "You have met the looper Michel, the Dutchman?" asked the little man, laughing strangely between each word. "He wished to frighten you terribly, but I have got his magic cudgel, which he shall never have again." "Yes, Mr. Schatzhauser," replied Peter, with a profound bow. "I was terribly frightened, but I suppose the black cock was yourself, and I am much obliged to you for killing the serpent. The object of my visit to you, however, is to ask your advice. I am in very poor circumstances, for charcoal burning is not a profitable trade, and being still young, I should think I might be made something better, seeing so often as I do how other people have thriven in a short time. I need only mention Ezekiel and the king of the ballroom, who have money like dirt." "Peter," said the little man, gravely, blowing the smoke of his pipe a long way off, "don't talk to me of these men. What good have they from being apparently happy for a few years here, and the more unhappy for it afterwards? You must not despise your trade. Your father and grandfather were honest people, Peter Munk, and they carried on the same trade. Let me not suppose it is love of idleness that brings you to me." Peter was startled at the gravity of the little man, and blushed. "No, Mr. Schatzhauser," said he, "idleness is the root of every vice, but you cannot blame me if another condition pleases me better than my own. A charcoal burner is, in truth, a very mean personage in the world. The glass manufacturer, the raftsman, and clockmakers are people much more looked upon." "Pride will have a fall," answered the little man of the pine wood, rather more kindly. "What a singular race you are, you men! It is but rarely that one is contented with the condition in which he was born and bred, and I would lay a wager that if you were a glass manufacturer you would wish to be a timber merchant, and if you were a timber merchant you would take a fancy to the ranger's place or the residence of the bailiff. But no matter for that. If you promise to work hard, I will get you something better to do. It is my practice to grant 3 wishes to those born on a Sunday who know how to find me out. The first 2 are quite free from any condition. The third I may refuse, should it be a foolish one. Now, therefore, Peter, say your wishes, but mind you wish something good and useful." "Hurrah!" shouted Peter. "You are a capital glass manikin, and justly do people call you the treasure-keeper, for treasures seem to be plentiful with you. Well then, Since I may wish what my heart desires, my first wish is that I may be able to dance better than the king of the ballroom, and to have always as much money in my pocket as fat Hezekiel." "You fool," replied the little man angrily. "What a paltry wish is this, to be able to dance well and to have money for gambling? Are you not ashamed of this silly wish, you blockish Peter? Would you cheat yourself out of a good fortune? What good will you and your poor mother reap from you dancing well? What use will money be to you, which according to your wish is only for the public house, there to be spent like that of the wretched king of the ballroom? And then you will have nothing for the whole week and starve. Another wish is now left free to you, but have a care to desire something more rational." Peter scratched himself behind his ears and said after some hesitation, "Now, I wish the finest and richest glass factory in the Schwarzwald, with everything appertaining to it, and money to carry it on." "Is that all?" asked the little man with a look of anxiety. "Is there nothing else, Peter?" "Why, you might add a horse and chaise." "Oh, you stupid Peter!" cried the little man, while he flung his glass pipe against the thick pine so that it broke in 100 pieces. "Horses? A carriage? Sense, I tell you, sense! Common sense and judgment you ought to have wished, but not a horse and chaise. Come, come, don't be so sad. We will do all we can to make it turn out for the best, even as it is, for the second wish is on the whole not altogether foolish. A good glass factory will support its man, but you ought to have wished judgment and sense in addition. A horse and chaise would come as a matter of course." "But, Mr. Schatzhauser," replied Peter, "I have another wish left, and might very well wish sense, if I am so much in need of it as you seem to think." "Say no more about it. You will get involved in many an embarrassment yet, when you will be glad of being at liberty to obtain your third wish. And now proceed on your way home." Drawing a small bag from his pocket, he said, "There are 2,000 florins. Let that be enough, and don't come again asking for money, for if you do, I must hang you up to the highest pine. That is the way I have always acted, ever since I have lived in the forest. 3 days ago old Wingfritz died, who had a large glass factory in the Unterwald. Go there tomorrow morning and make a fair offer for it. Look well to yourself, be prudent, and be industrious. I will come to see you from time to time and assist you with word and deed, since you have not wished for common sense. But I must repeat it seriously. Your first wish was evil. Guard against frequenting the public house, Peter. No one who did so ever prospered long." The little man, while thus talking to him, had taken a new pipe of the most beautiful glass from his pocket, charged it with dry fir apples, and stuck it into his little toothless mouth. Then, drawing out a large burning glass, he stepped into the sun and lighted it. When he had done this, he kindly offered his hand to Peter, added a few more words of salutary advice which he might carry on his way, puffed and blew still faster, and finally disappeared in a cloud of smoke, which smelt of genuine Dutch canaster, and slowly curling upwards, vanished amidst the tops of the pines. On his arrival home, Peter found his mother in great anxiety about him, for the good dame thought in reality her son had been drawn among the recruits. He, however, was in great glee and full of hope, and related to her how he had met with a good friend in the forest, who had advanced him money to begin another trade. Although his mother had been living for 30 years in a charcoal burner's hut, and was as much accustomed to the sight of sooty people as any miller's wife is to the floury face of her husband, yet as soon as her Peter showed her a more splendid lot, she was vain enough to despise her former condition, and said, "In truth, as the mother of a man who possesses a glass manufactory, I shall indeed be something different from neighbor Kate and Betsy, and shall in future sit more consequentially at church among the people of quality." Her son soon came to terms with the heir of the glass manufactory. He kept the workmen he found and made them work day and night at manufacturing glass. At first he was well enough pleased with his new trade. He was in the habit of walking leisurely into the factory, striding up and down with an air of consequence, and with his hands in his pockets, looking now in one corner, now in another, and talking about various things at which his workmen often used to laugh heartily. His chief delight, however, was to see the glass blown, when he would often set to work himself, and form the strangest figures of the soft mass. But he soon took a dislike to the work. First came only for an hour in the day, then only every other day, and finally only once a week, so that his workmen did just what they liked. All this proceeded from his frequenting the public house. The Sunday after he had come back from the Tannenbühl, he went to the public house, and who should be jumping there already but the king of the ballroom. Fat Hesekiel also was already sitting by a quart pot, playing at dice for crown pieces. Now Peter quickly put his hand into his pocket to feel whether the glass mannikin had been true to his word, and lo, his pockets were stuffed full of silver and gold. He also felt an itching and twitching in his legs, as if they wished to dance and caper. When the first dance was over, he took his place with his partner at the top next to the king of the ballroom, and if the latter jumped 3 feet high, Peter jumped 4. If he made fantastic and graceful steps, Peter twined and twisted his legs in such a manner that all the spectators were utterly amazed with delight and admiration. But when it was rumored in the dance-room that Peter had bought a glass manufactory, and when people saw that Peter, as often as he passed the musicians, threw a 6-batzner piece to them, there was no end of astonishment. Some thought he had found a treasure in the forest. Others were of opinion that he had succeeded to some fortune, but all respected him now, and considered him a made man, simply because he had plenty of money. Indeed, that very evening he lost 20 florins at play, and yet his pockets jingled and tingled as if there were 100 thalers in them. When Peter saw how much respected he was, he could no longer contain himself with joy and pride. He threw away handfuls of money and distributed it profusely among the poor, knowing full well, as he did, how poverty had formerly pinched him. The feats of the king of the ballroom were completely eclipsed by those of the new dancer, and Peter was surnamed the Emperor of the ballroom. The most daring gamblers did not stake so much as he did on a Sunday, neither did they, however, lose so much. But then, the more he lost, the more he won. This was exactly what he had demanded from the glass mannikin, for he had wished he might always have as much money in his pocket as fat Hesekiel, and it was to this very man he lost his money. If he lost 20 or 30 florins at a stroke, they were immediately replaced in his own pocket, as soon as Hesekiel pocketed them. By degrees he carried his revelling and gambling further than the worst fellows in the Schwarzwald, and he was oftener called Gambling Peter than Emperor of the Ballroom, since he now gambled almost all the weekdays. In consequence of his imprudence, his glass manufactory gradually fell off. He had manufactured as much as ever could be made, but he had failed to purchase, together with the factory, the secret of disposing of it most profitably. At length it accumulated to such a degree that he did not know what to do with it, and sold it for half price to itinerant dealers in order to pay his workmen. Walking homewards one evening from the public house, he could not, in spite of the quantity of wine he had drunk, to make himself merry, help thinking with terror and grief of the decline of his fortune. While engaged in these reflections, he all at once perceived some one walking by his side. He looked round, and behold, it was the glass mannikin. At the sight of him he fell into a violent passion, protested solemnly, and swore that the little man was the cause of all his misfortune. "What am I now to do with the horse and chaise?" he cried. "Of what use is the manufactory and all the glass to me? Even when I was merely a wretched charcoal burner I lived more happily and had no cares. Now I know not when the bailiff may come to value my goods and chattels, and seize all for debt." "Indeed," replied the glass mannikin, "indeed? I am the cause of your being unfortunate. Is that your gratitude for my benefits? Who bade you wish so foolishly? A glass manufacturer you wish to be, and you did not know where to sell your glass. Did I not tell you to be cautious in what you wished? Common sense, Peter, and prudence you wanted." "A fig for your sense and prudence," cried Peter. "I am as shrewd a fellow as anyone, and will prove it to you, glass mannikin," seizing him rudely by the collar as he spoke these words, and crying,
"Have I now got you, Schatzhauser?"
"Now I will tell you my third wish, which you shall grant me. I'll have instantly, on the spot, 200,000 hard thalers and a house." "Woe is me!" he cried, suddenly shaking his hand, for the little man of the wood had changed himself into red-hot glass and burned in his hand like bright fire. Nothing more was to be seen of him. For several days his swollen hand reminded him of his ingratitude and folly. Soon, however, he silenced his conscience, saying, "Should they sell my glass, manufactory and all, still, fat Ezekiel is certain to me, and as long as he has money on a Sunday, I cannot want." "Very true, Peter. But if he has none?" And so it happened one day, and it proved a singular example in arithmetic. For he came one Sunday in his chaise to the inn, and at once all the people popped their heads out of the windows, one saying, "There comes Gambling Peter," a second saying, "Yes, there is the emperor of the ballroom, the wealthy glass manufacturer," while a third shook his head, saying, "It is all very well with his wealth, but people talk a great deal about his debts, and somebody in town has said that the bailiff will not wait much longer before he distrains upon him." At this moment the wealthy Peter saluted the guests at the windows in a haughty and grave manner, descended from his chaise, and cried, "Good evening, mine host of the Sun. Is fat Ezekiel here?" To this question a deep voice answered from within, "Only come in, Peter. Your place is kept for you. We're all here at the cards already." Peter, entering the parlour, immediately put his hand into his pocket, and perceived, by its being quite full, that Ezekiel must be plentifully supplied. He sat down at the table among the others and played, losing and winning alternately. Thus they kept playing till night, when all sober people went home. After having continued for some time by candlelight, two of the gamblers said, "Now it is enough, and we must go home to our wives and children." But Peter challenged Ezekiel to remain. The latter was unwilling, but said after a while, "Be it as you wish. I will count my money, and then we'll play dice at 5 florins the stake, for anything lower is, after all, but child's play." He drew his purse, and, after counting, found he had 100 florins left. Now Peter knew how much he himself had left, without counting first. But if Ezekiel had before won, he now lost stake after stake, and swore most awfully. If he cast a pash, Peter immediately cast one likewise, and always 2 points higher. At length he put down the last 5 florins on the table, saying, "Once more, and if I lose this stake also, yet I will not leave off. You will then lend me some of the money you have won now, Peter. One honest fellow helps the other." "As much as you like, even if it were 100 florins," replied Peter, joyful at his gain, and fat Ezekiel rattled the dice and threw up 15. "Pash!" he exclaimed, "now we'll see." But Peter threw up 18, and at this moment a hoarse, well-known voice said behind him, "So, that was the last." He looked round, and behind him stood the gigantic figure of Michel the Dutchman. Terrified, he dropped the money he had already taken up. But fat Ezekiel, not seeing Michel, demanded that Peter should advance him 10 florins for playing. As if in a dream, Peter hastily put his hand into his pocket, but there was no money. He searched in the other pocket, but in vain. He turned his coat inside out. Not a farthing, however, fell out, and at this instant he first recollected his first wish. viz. To have always as much money in his pocket as fat Hesekiel. All had now vanished like smoke. The host and Hesekiel looked at him with astonishment as he still searched for and could not find his money. They would not believe that he had no more left, but when they at length searched his pockets without finding anything, they were enraged, swearing that gambling Peter was an evil wizard, and had wished away all the money he had won home to his own house. Peter defended himself stoutly, but appearances were against him. Hesekiel protested he would tell this shocking story to all the people in the Schwarzwald, and the host vowed he would, the following morning early, go into the town and inform against Peter as a sorcerer, adding that he had no doubt of his being burnt alive. Upon this they fell furiously upon him, tore off his coat, and kicked him out of doors. Not one star was twinkling in the sky to lighten Peter's way as he sneaked sadly towards his home, but still he could distinctly recognize a dark form striding by his side, which at length said, "It is all over with you, Peter Munk. All your splendor is at an end, and this I could have foretold you even at the time when you would not listen to me, but rather ran to the silly glass dwarf. You now see to what you have come by disregarding my advice. But try your fortune with me this time. I have compassion on your fate. No one ever yet repented of applying to me, and if you don't mind the walk to the Tannenbühl, I shall be there all day tomorrow, and you may speak to me if you will call." Peter now very clearly perceived who was speaking to him, but feeling a sensation of awe, he made no answer and ran towards home. When on the Monday morning he came to his factory, he not only found his workmen, but also other people whom no one likes to see, viz. the bailiff and 3 beadles. The bailiff wished Peter good morning, and asked him how he had slept, and then took from his pocket a long list of Peter's creditors, saying, with a stern look, "Can you pay or not? Be short, for I have no time to lose, and you know it is full 3 leagues to the prison." Peter, in despair, confessed he had nothing left, telling the bailiff he might value all the premises, horses, and carts. But while they went about examining and valuing the things, Peter said to himself, "Well, it is but a short way to the Tannenbühl, and as the little man has not helped me, I will not try for once the big man." He ran towards the Tannenbühl as fast as if the beadles were at his heels. On passing the spot where the glass mannequin had first spoken to him, he felt as if an invisible hand were stopping him, but he tore himself away and ran onwards till he came to the boundary which he had well marked. Scarcely had he, almost out of breath, called, "Judge Michel! Mr. Judge Michel!" Then suddenly the gigantic raftsman with his pole stood before him. "Have you come, then?" said the latter, laughing. "Were they going to fleece you and sell you to your creditors? Well, be easy. All your sorrow comes, as I have always said, from the little glass mannequin, the separatist and pietist. When one gives, one ought to give right plentifully, and not like that skinflint. But come," he continued, turning towards the forest, "follow me to my house. There we'll see whether we can strike a bargain." "Strike a bargain?" thought Peter. "What can he want of me? What can I sell to him? Am I perhaps to serve him, or what is it that he can want?" They went at first uphill over a steep forest path, when all at once they stopped at a dark, deep, and almost perpendicular ravine. Michel leaped down as easily as he would go down marble steps, but Peter almost fell into a fit when he saw him below, rising up like a church steeple, reaching him an arm as long as a scaffolding pole, with a hand at the end as broad as the table in the alehouse, and calling in a voice which sounded like the deep tones of a death bell, "Set yourself boldly on my hand. Hold fast by the fingers, and you will not fall off." Peter, trembling, did as he was ordered, sat down upon his hand, and held himself fast by the thumb of the giant. They now went down a long way and very deep, yet, to Peter's astonishment, it did not grow darker. On the contrary, the daylight seemed rather to increase in the chasm, and it was some time before Peter's eyes could bear it. Michel's statue became smaller as Peter came lower down, and he stood now in his former size before a house just like those of the wealthy peasants of the Schwarzwald.
The room into which Peter was led differed in nothing but its appearance of solitariness from those of other people.
The wooden clock, the stove of Dutch tiles, the broad benches and utensils on the shelves were the same as anywhere else. Michel taught him to sit down at the large table, then went out of the room and returned with a pitcher of wine and glasses. Having filled these, they now began a conversation, and Dutch Michel expatiated on the pleasures of the world, talked of foreign countries, fine cities and rivers, so that Peter at length, feeling a yearning after such sights, candidly told Michel his wish. If you had courage and strength in your body to undertake anything, could a few palpitations of your stupid heart make you tremble? And the offences against honour or misfortunes, why should a rational fellow care for either? Did you feel it in your head when they but lately called you a cheat and a scoundrel? Or did it give you a pain in your stomach when the bailiff came to eject you from your house? Tell me, where was it you felt pain? In my heart, replied Peter, putting his hand on his beating breast, for he felt as if his heart was anxiously turning within him. Excuse me for saying so, but you have thrown away many 100 florins on vile beggars and other rabble. What has it profited you? They have wished you blessings and health for it. Well, have you grown the healthier for that? For half that money you might have kept a physician. A blessing, a fine blessing, forsooth, when one is distrained upon and ejected. And what was it that urged you to put your hand into your pocket as often as a beggar held out his broken hat? Why, your heart again, and ever your heart, neither your eyes, nor your tongue, nor your arms, nor your legs, but your heart. You have, as the proverb truly says, taken too much too hard. But how can we accustom ourselves to act otherwise? I take at this moment every possible pains to suppress it, and yet my heart palpitates and pains me. You indeed, poor fellow, cried Michel, laughing. You can do nothing against it, but give me this scarcely palpitating thing, and you will see how comfortable you will then feel. My heart to you? Cried Peter, horrified. Why then, I must die on the spot? Never! Yes, if one of your surgeons would operate upon you and take out your heart, you must indeed die. But with me, it is a different thing. Just come in here and convince yourself. Rising at these words, he opened the door of a chamber and took Peter in. On stepping over the threshold, his heart contracted convulsively, but he minded it not, for the sight that presented itself was singular and surprising. On several shelves glasses were standing, filled with a transparent liquid, and each contained a heart. All were labelled with names which Peter read with curiosity. There was the heart of the bailiff in F, that of fat Ezekiel, that of the king of the ballroom, that of the ranger. There were the hearts of 6 usurious corn merchants, of 8 recruiting officers, of 3 money brokers. In short, it was a collection of the most respectable hearts 20 leagues around. Look, said Dutch Michel, all these have shaken off the anxieties and cares of life. None of these hearts any longer beat anxiously and uneasily, and their former owners feel happy now they have got rid of the troublesome guest. But what do they now carry in their breasts instead? Asked Peter, whose head was nearly swimming at what he beheld. This, replied he, taking out a small drawer and presenting to him a heart of stone. Indeed, said Peter, who could not prevent a cold shuddering coming over him. A heart of marble. But tell me, Mr. Michel, such a heart must be very cold in one's breast. True, but very agreeably cool. Why should a heart be warm? For in winter its warmth is of little use, and good strong Kirschwasser does more than a warm heart, and in summer, when all is hot and sultry, you can't think how cooling such a heart is. And, as before said, such a heart feels neither anxiety nor terror, neither foolish compassion nor other grief. "And that is all you can offer me?" asked Peter indignantly. "I looked for money, and you are going to give me a stone." "Well, 100,000 florins, methinks, would suffice you for the present. If you employ it properly, you may soon make it 1,000,000.
100,000! exclaimed the poor coal-burner joyfully. "Well, don't beat so vehemently in my bosom. We shall soon have done with one another. Agreed, Michel. Give me the stone and the money, and the alarum you may take out of its case."
"I always thought you were a reasonable fellow," replied Michel with a friendly smile. "Come, let us drink another glass, and then I will pay you the money."
They went back to the room and sat down again to the wine, drinking one glass after another, till Peter fell into a profound sleep. End of section 2.